This is Larry Lawton, and he's an ex-jewel thief. Larry's a former career criminal, once considered the biggest jewel thief in the United States.
Man, we used to go down, look around, make sure no one was there, stop, go right slow in front of the house, see nobody there, jump out of the car, jump in that car, take off. It's got the keys in it. You're gone. The guy would come out of his house and there'd be no car there. Gangster Redemption, Chapter 1, second half of it, of Who Wants to Fuck Mrs. Armelino. It was a rough chapter, the last part where I ended, getting abused. I know a lot of things happen, and I know a lot of people have abuses going on in their life or know of people who've been abused. When I read about that church scandals and stuff, I know how true it is because there are friends of mine my age today who were abused by the same people back in those days when I was at in Catholic school and in a Catholic church back in the day when I was an altar boy. And other people had similar situations than me. And we all, I guess, handle it in our own ways. And it's just sad. So if anything is going on in your life, just get help or know you're not alone. Also realize that, there is help out there. Don't define yourself for that. I'm sure I did define myself for a long time. And let me jump right back into it. Like I said, chapter 1, second half, we're going to continue. I left off on with the church and abuse. Well, at that point, that's when I started to get a little bit wild. And, people said, man, Larry, he's a changed kid. I wouldn't go to church, all that. But I also started getting violent. I used to like to fight. My brother and I would fight. Peter works with me today, says, you guys were hornets, man. You'd be in a net fighting. One story, we were playing hockey, street hockey, and we had roller skates on. We had the net set up, and back then, fighting was like kind of normal in hockey. So it would like be a cool thing if you got into a fight during a hockey game. And what do you think we're gonna do? Well, my brother and I get into a fight, and we both get our skates caught in the net, and we're fighting like hornets. And I get out of mine first. I get out of my skates first, and I grab a 2x4, and I slam and split my own brother's head open. I know it's crazy. It's just that violence was in me, and I think now, looking back, a lot of that had to do with my abuse. But, it was funny because my brother, and I'll never forget, Louis DiNucci was a kid that dated my sister, my older sister, Debbie. Now, we're about 14, so he's about probably 18, because my sister, Debbie, is 4 years older than me. And, Debbie, Louis DiNucci would come over, and John Fenton was her other boyfriend. But Louis DiNucci, I was waiting for him, because after my brother got out of those skates, I knew he was going to kill me. Remember, my brother's a year and a half older than me then. And he was full of blood. He was looking to kill me, catch me and kill me, whatever was going to happen. And I'm running around the block, locked myself in the house. It was so funny looking back. But I was this crazy kid, too. I mean, I took a knife, a butcher knife, and went after the other kids because we were playing in my house during the time. Remember, in 1972, this is after the World Center, my parents had no money. And my dad was laid off, and we did what we had to do. Like I told you, we had playing basketball in slippers with no money. In the neighborhood I come from, you just still went out and you played. Nobody questioned you or anything of that nature. Nobody had funny story about my buddy Runt. We used to call him Runt, Tommy Joe. We go into a bowling lanes, and back then they had and they still do, I'm sure, the bowling shoes were red and white. So Dennis, who I talked about it later, Dennis says to me, he looks at Tommy Joe, and he says to Tommy Joe, he says, hey, he goes, you forgot your shoes when we left. You forgot your shoes. He goes, I didn't forget them. These are better than my shoes. Bowling shoes. He was walking around with bowling shoes. And it was normal to all of us. I walked around in slippers for a while. And we didn't have money. That's just the way we were, and that's the way things were. And it's amazing what we did when we were young kids. But here I am, tough kid. in the streets now, fighting a lot and drinking and partying. Now, Dennis, I told you, I grew up with Dennis, and Dennis come from a very tough family. His dad was killed in a robbery, and Dennis never judged me for all what I did, ever. And Dennis was a rough kid. Dennis used to live up in Revere Avenue, I think it was called, Revere. And that was past the church. So he used to walk down the hill and come into Locust Point, which was probably a mile and a half away. And he would walk that distance and come there in the snow, and it didn't matter what we were doing. We're out freezing. And he would come into the neighborhood. We'd all hang out there. We would drink. We'd play a game called AC Deucey. AC Deucey was a game where you get a deck of cards. You each put, let's say there's 5 of us, and we're going to play AC Deucey. And you put up $5, I put up, let's say there's 10 of us or 8 of us, whatever it is, you each put up $5. Now it's in a pot. Now whoever's next, the first card's dealt right in front of the pot, and it's a 3. The next card that dealt is a 9. You have to bet how much you think in there is going to go in between those 2 cards. So you might say $10. And if you lose, you got to put $10 to the pot. If you win, you take the $10 out of the pot. That pot used to get up to astronomical numbers, hundreds of dollars. We're kids, 14, 15 years old. And that pots are $100 pots. Dennis, myself, we were crazy. We'd say, no matter almost what 2 cards came in there, pot. And we laugh to this day, pot. And we're saying, what idiots we were. We didn't care. We were just off the chains in so many ways. We used to play baseball against German Stadium, baseball against Fort Schuyler kids, baseball against the Edgewater Park kids. We'd be fighting. In between games, in between an inning, somebody says something wrong to the other. Whoever's got a bat in their hand is fighting. It was just it was what happened. You got to remember, back when I grew up in the 70s when there was no ESPN. I remember this. We had kids that weren't the sharpest kids, and we'd all be gambling. It was 10 cents for a phone call back then. They actually had pay phones. A lot of you guys don't remember. They only have cell phones now. There was no cell phones. We had pay phones. So we would have a stack of dimes in our pockets. We're calling sports phone because you didn't have ESPN to get phone numbers. So we're making bets with bookies, and we don't know what score it is. And every 10 minutes they'd have updates. And we'd be going up to the phone, getting scores, and then rehearing it when you won. It was just crazy. And then, of course, you'd wait for the newspaper the next day. And when the newspaper came out, you'd see if you won. Oh, what baseball pitchers. Another friend of mine, Ronnie Giordano. Love him to death. The great kid. His dad was connected in the mob, and he was a numbers runner. And Ronnie... We're betting. Him and I, we used to meet, and we're 15 years old. We used to go to Lehman High School. Lehman High School, talk about morons, New York City. They build a high school above a major highway in the Bronx, New York. Do you know how much crap was going on? We hung a guy by his feet over the highway. I mean, it was just a sick school. But we didn't even go there. We used to go to the diner across the street and figure out what teams to bet with the paper. And here we are betting big money, and we're young kids. And how did we pay for that? We hustled. And when I say hustled, here's one hustle. There was a Pathmark. A Pathmark is a grocery store like you might know today, Publix or Winn-Dixie. But Pathmark was a big name grocer up north, in North America, at least up in the New York area. And it was on East Tremont Avenue. And a couple of our friends got to working in there as young teenagers. But what do? We start stealing the meat and the lobsters and cases of this stuff and putting it out near the dumpster before they close. They close, and what do? We come back later and get that stuff, and we sell it up and down the avenue for good money. I mean, we're talking about good stuff, and we did that all the time. I mean, I know I'm not proud of it. It is what it was when we were kids. I'm telling the stories. We put a grocery store, chain store, out of business. That's how much money they lost with us in there. Literally, they changed. They went out of business there. Whether they said, why can't we make money in this neighborhood or not, I don't know what it was. We literally put a chain store out of business in there. And that was up and down East Tremont Avenue. I ended up working in Interborough Theater. It's called the Interborough Theater. It was a fourplex. That was a big deal back then. So I get a job as an usher. I think I was 15 years old. And I'm a kid that don't care anymore, you know. I'm a struck kid. I know I had some issues going on in my head. I had sexuality issues. I didn't know what it was. Was I okay? Was it normal? Was other things happen to other people? You don't want to say anything about your abuses because, you know, priests were revered in those days. And anyway, I was working in the theater and I get caught. I'll never forget the name of the movie, Americathon. You could look the movie up. Americathon. I think it was 1976. So I was 15 years old. And the movie Americathon is playing. And I'm drinking a 6-pack of beer in the back of the theater. I'm the usher of this theater. And I'm drinking beer. And the manager comes in, looks at me, sees me sitting down drinking beer. And he goes, "You're fired." I never left the theater. I watched the whole movie. And I kept drinking my beer. He must have think this kid's crazy. I get fired from that job. I saw my first movie in that theater. I ended up seeing the movie Ch1 with John Wayne in, I think, 1971, I think it was. I saw my first movie. My grandfather took me to that movie. It was Ch1, a Western. Again, you get some memory and never forget. So anyway, here we are, tough kids, figuring things out in the streets. What are you going to do? And we're hustling. We would go to these games. We used to go to Yankee games. Yankee games in 1977, I think the year, 77 or 78, the Yankee Stadium was redone. So it's the brand new stadium. We used to get, they were $1 a seat, $1 for a bleacher seat in the Yankee Stadium back then. And we used to, it was the right field bleachers. There's a gap between the wall and the bleacher. And we're in the stadium. We paid $1. We used to take the 6 train down to the stadium, and we used to get off at the Grand Concourse at 161st Street. In the Grand Concourse, we'd get off the train and go to Yankee Stadium. And we'd get into the stadium, and we'd be there. Now, this one time we go there, it was the first time after the Yankees refurbished the stadium. It was a big deal. And the first Yankee to ever hit a home run in the new Yankee Stadium, we called it the new Yankee Stadium, was Chris Chambliss. Remember that name, anybody? Older people will. Chris Chambliss was a baseball player. He hits the first home run in that stadium into the bleachers. And my brother and I are the first 2 civilians on the new Jumbotron scoreboard. And we were on the back page of the New York Post sports section because we jumped the wall into the area between the stadium and the fence, and we get the ball. We get Chris Chambliss's ball. We get kicked out of the stadium. We go back. We don't care. Little do we know how much things like that would have been worth. We play with the ball in the field. Actually, it was right in front of Michael Kay's house. Michael Kay lived right on Throgs Neck Boulevard, right when you come in to Locust Point. And it's like Pennyfield Avenue comes around. It goes all the way to the end to, it was Hadding, Glennon, Geegridge, and Tierney Place. I lived on Hadding. Well, on the front block coming out was where Michael Kay lived. And his father and mother used to sit on the stoop and watch us play ball right in the lot right in front of us. Like sand lot, they call it. So we're in that sand lot, Michael, all of us, and we lose Chris Chambliss's baseball in the yacht. Well, it was called Stenderhoff's Boatyard. There was a boatyard across the street from where the home run fence was around this thing. I mean, it was a fence there, and we called that a home run. And after that, there's another fence that goes into a weeded area called the Boatyard. And that area, we lost the ball. We lost Chris Chambliss's home run ball. First home run ever hit by a Yankee in that stadium. We lose it. I mean, how stupid are we? But we don't know the value of stuff back then. We didn't know. You know how many baseball cards I put into the spokes of tires? And we used to flip them and do the cards. Baseball cards were a big deal when I was a kid. And now they're worth money, but it was a big deal. It wasn't a business like it is today. Kids used to play with it. I had shoe boxes full of baseball cards. Everybody did. It was great. But we used to hustle and play sports. So even when we'd play sports, no matter what time of the season it was, we're playing sports. It could be wintertime. We would shovel the basketball court off, literally shovel it off and play in the snow. Willis Reed to the hole, yes! And we'd be hitting shots and playing down low and elbowing each other and fighting and doing everything they did in real sports we're playing. We'd play football in the street. We'd have from telephone pole to telephone pole with a sewer in the middle. I'll never forget, my dad used to whistle. If you weren't home when he whistled, you were going to get your ass kicked. So you made sure you were in listening distance to your father's whistle. That's what he would do. And my father would whistle, and you can believe it, you'd be home. Or when the lights went on, the street lights would go on, and then you knew you had to get home. Because he'd say, you got to get home when those street lights are on. And we'd come home. And this is in the Bronx. Matter of fact, this was a time even when, if you guys remember, the Son of Sam. The Son of Sam was David Berkowitz, was killing people in the Bronx and all around New York City. All around. He killed somebody right near Burr Avenue, right near the Triangle Bar, where I used to go all the time with my dad. Now, at this time, I'm going into the Triangle Bar, making bets, getting to know people. I mean, literally hanging out in a bar. At 15, 16 years old. Now, drinking age was 18. It was 18. But we're literally sitting on a bar stool, having a drink or a rum and coke or a vodka and orange juice in a bar at 16. And I'm telling you, I looked like I was 12. I had blonde, curly hair. I was 100 pounds. Matter of fact, this is really funny. I was going to be a jockey. When I was 15 years old, my dad loved horses. He sent me to Delray Farms. Him and my grandfather knew somebody who had a racing farm. I was under 100 pounds. I was strong, scrappy little kid. And they thought if I don't grow, I'm going to be a jockey. They wanted me to be a jockey. I ended up going to Delray Farms in Florida. This is back in the early 70s. And I'm going to be a jockey. So they got me mucking stalls. They got me trotting horses. They got me grooming them, walking them, doing all this stuff in a horse farm, a racehorse farm. I end up the next summer, I gained too much weight and I couldn't do that again. But it's funny because now I'm 240 pounds, 5'10", 240 is what I weigh. But it's kind of funny. I was going to be a jockey. You're looking at a guy here who's going to be a jockey. Just think of that when you're looking at me. This guy's going to be a jockey. Yeah, right. But anyway, we're tough kids. We're in the streets in the Bronx, New York. And we're hustling. We're selling stuff up and down the avenue. We're any scam. So what do we find? I'm in the bar. And I meet a guy from the Purple Gang. The Purple Gang, if you look them up, Purple Gang it was a notorious gang of killers. They used to do hits for the mob. They used to do a lot of stuff. They were killers. And there was a guy in the Purple Gang who used to hang out at the Triangle Bar. And I used to go in and I always used to ask him. I told you I was an inquisitive kid, but not like a rat. No way. Not like, what are you doing? They say, get out of here, kid. They were educating you. He always had a paper bag on him. I asked, what's in the bag? You always have the bag with us. He showed me the bag. It's a pistol. It was a 45 caliber. I knew what a 45 was because it was a flat gun and it was that kind of gun. They didn't have 9mm and all these great guns then. It was a 40. He used to carry a 45. It wasn't a revolver or a pistol. It was a 45. He used to carry it in a paper bag right there. Killer. So one day he says to me, he goes, hey, kid, you want to make some money? I always want to make money. He goes, you want to rob some cars? I go, what does it entail? He goes, you bring the cars to a chop shop we have over near Pelham and Split Rock. Pelham and Split Rock were two golf courses in the Bronx near City Island. And he'd say, go take these cars over there. You get $500 a car. $500 a car. All we got to do is bring the car there. So we all knew how to hotwire cars. Back then it was easy to get under. You can actually hotwire them. Or you used to pull the ignition, where you put the key in a car. Back now it's all buttons and stuff. But they used to put them on the column of the car. You put in the thing, you turn the key. We used to punch that out with a hammer, bang, with a hammer and a heavy screwdriver. You could punch that out, pop it, and then use the screwdriver and just turn the car on. Boom, start right up. It even stopped the lock, like the wheel would lock. When you broke that, it worked. It was normal. If you saw a guy riding around when he had a screwdriver in there, he robbed the car. And you used to see that sometimes. So here we started robbing cars. Back then you used to take a hanger, put it right through the window, pop it. And they didn't want you to destroy the car. They knew you'd destroy that part. But they want the engine, the tires, the rims, the bumpers were expensive back then. So they would strip a car. In this place where I used to drop the hot cars off at, it was funny. It would look like a graveyard of all hunks of metal that were cars. It was like just the frame of the car was sitting there because the cars were taken. They were all ripped off. It was crazy. It was just that's the way it was. And you'd go in there, and the guy would give you $500. Your friend would follow you. Neil used to follow me, would drop me off, follow me. Boom, give me $500. I jump in his car, and we're gone. We're happy. Sometimes we do 2 cars. And how we got good at robbing cars is we said, wait a minute. Why are we doing it this way? Here's what New York City and most cold areas, back then people used to come out of their house, start their car up, go back in the house and change and shower and let their car heat up, let the defrost work so the windshield would be all clear, and they'd come out and they'd go to work. Well, if you went down a street in Brooklyn or the Bronx or anywhere, you can see the smoke coming out of the muffler pipe, and you know the car's there and nobody's there. Man, we used to go down, look around, make sure no one was there, stop, go right slow in front of the house, see nobody there, jump out of the car, jump in that car, take off. It's got the keys in it. You're gone. The guy would come out of his house and there'd be no car there. Literally, you're gone with keys and everything. And the cops aren't jumping and stopping everything in the world to look for a car. Trust me, you got to fill out a report. We're longer. That car was chop shop. That went to the chop shop. It was gone and ripped up before the police were done with the report in New York back then. Robbing cars was a big deal in New York City back in the 70s. Obviously, things changed with LoJack. That's a detection device. And now, forget it. It's just different. Of course, they're robbed. It's just a different way that they rob stuff now. So anyway, here we are, robbing cars, making money. We figured out how to rob. People would also, besides just doing them in their house, a dude would come along the avenue. Like in East Tremont Avenue, there'd be a diner, a luncheonette, or a little 5 and dime store. And they'd run in there and they'd get a bagel, and they would get a newspaper and a bagel or something. So they're waiting in there. So what do? They pull up in front of the place, they jump out, they leave their car running, and they go in. We would be waiting right near that bagel store, or the little 5 and dime little deli. There's a deli, we call it. And we'd go. He would run in. We'd run right to his car, jump in his car. 90% of the times, they never knew they were robbed until they came back out because it was gone that fast. Literally, you just walk right past him and jump in the car and go. He's walking into the place. He's not looking back at his car. It just didn't do that. And it was funny because when I was robbing those cars, they didn't ask us, what car do you want to rob? Like they didn't say, hey, give us a Mercedes, give us a Cadillac. Whatever car we came with, they gave us $500. $500 was a lot of money back then. But they took those cars apart and got the tires and got the rims and they got the bumpers and they got the engines and they got the seats and they got whatever was in that car that was good. Trust me, they made a fortune. They'd strip it right then and there and they would put stuff on a truck. The truck was gone. People were coming in. It was literally called a chop shop. Now they would move that chop shop around, but they're only different areas. And then the city would come and bust that area for whatever reason, and they clean it up with with trucks and everything. 6 months later, that area is used again. Same area, same thing happening. It was just the way it was back in the 70s. And I used to rob cars. I used to do everything I can to hustle. And all it was, because we were gambling so much money. We were off the charts. We were like betting the AC Deucey. We would go then. Atlantic City starts opening up. I think Atlantic City opened up in the mid-70s to late 70s. So what do? We start going down there. And we start gambling down there. We got the bug. Most of the people I grew up with, there was drugs, of course. There was alcohol, of course. And gambling. There were the 3 major vices. I was never an addict with drugs, or I was never an addict with alcohol. I've done them all. Done them, every drug. You all know that, and you'll hear more about that down the line in all of these videos. I've done every drug in the book. Was never an addict, but gambling, I love to gamble. I got a rush. Win, lose, or draw, I got a major rush. And that's what a lot of us younger guys did. We got a rush out of gambling, and a big rush, let me tell you that. So, we would gamble on anything. We used to jump in a car and go to Yonkers Raceway. We can make Yonkers Raceway in about 10 minutes flat from the Bronx. I mean, hit it. up the Bronx Highway, boom, get on it, hit Yonkers, New York is right above the Bronx, and we would jump out of the car, leave the car to the valet, and get there and make a race that we wanted to bet, because we were all junkies. I mean, Ronnie, Dennis, my brother, me, all of us, we had a whole cruise that were doing that. Runt, well, all of us were hung out, we'd hang out, we'd run and do all this kind of crazy stuff. Had a lot of fun. We were all very tight. We'd drink together at night. We'd party with making the mixes, do stuff. Going to a bar was a big deal. I mean, we started doing that when we started getting older, like 16, 17, 18. Yeah, we're older. And we'd be like big shots in a bar. But when we were a little younger, we were up in the fields, in the weeds, we used to call it, or down under the bridge. Now, under the bridge today, I went back to my old neighborhood. You can't go there anymore. This post 9/11 stuff is they have under the bridges, stuff. We used to call a place back there called Strawberry Field where I got laid for my first time. I was in the back of Strawberry Field. And now you're on the jetty area. Now there's a jetty and they had all these rocks. You'd see rats, water rats, this big. I mean, big old rats. Like I saw in Atlanta. Even Atlanta was Big Ben, but these were rats. I mean, you'd see them in and out of the rocks and stuff in the daytime when we'd fish. One time there was a guy fishing and we didn't want him there. We were doing something, setting up something illegal. So we take Molotov cocktails. You know what Molotov cocktails are? That's a glass bottle filled with gas with a rag in it, and we'd masking tape it, and then you take it out. Now it's gas in a bottle with a rag. You light that rag on fire, and then you throw the Molotov cocktail. It breaks and gas goes all over the place. So we do that where a guy is fishing, and it gets all around him. It doesn't get him. He has nowhere to go. He jumps in the water. And we used to laugh. I mean, we used to do that. I mean, we were kind of sick kids with doing this stuff. And again, I'm going to always mention this, and I always do, and it's in the link below. I do not sponsor or support all the crazy shit I did when I grew up. I'm just giving you guys the foundation of why I turned out the way I turned out. You all know I was a bad guy for a long time, and then I turned into I believe, a good guy right now, and I feel I am. But this let me end where I was going. So here I am in school. I used to be able to go to school with a piece of loose leaf, literally with a piece of loose leaf, and pass. I had a high IQ, and I used to, easy to go. I get in fights in school, and we used to bring an 8-pack of nips that are beer. I used to bring those to school, and we would drink it in school. We'd get into a fight with another group. It got so big, the fight, they called in the horseback cops. It's like a riot, the horseback cops. I wasn't really wanted. They said, listen, you got to get out of here. You got to either go to service or go to another school. And that was it. I ended up going to the Coast Guard. I said, I got to get out of this life. This is a dead end. And I ended up going downtown in Manhattan to 26 Federal Plaza. And I go in, and first I find a recruiter. I found the recruiter in Westchester Square, where I lived. There was an OTB. We knew where all that stuff was because they had a recruiting station up there, but there was an OTB. OTB was what they call off-track betting. It was a legal bookie for the city of New York who lose money. Only the city of New York could lose money on a legal booking. And they used to have the horses, and there was a recruiting station up there, and I go in there, and I ended up taking the test for the Coast Guard, and I love the water, and I got the highest, at that time, the highest exam ever in the Coast Guard entrance exam. And I had my choice. I ended up wanting to be a bosun mate, and I ended up going to boot camp into Palom. I joined the Coast Guard on August 28th, 1979. 26. It might have been August 26th. I might have forgot. I didn't remember. Nah, it's either August 26th or 28th, or even 26th, 27th, 28th. One of those of 1979. I joined the United States Coast Guard. I'm 17 years old. I end up turning 18 on my birthday, October 3rd, in boot camp. It was an 8-week boot camp. And you'd think the Coast Guard would have sent me to Cape May, New Jersey, which is where the boot camp is now. And they had that one back then. Nope, they send me to Petaluma, California. I went to the boot camp in Petaluma, California. And I'll tell you what, it was great. I enjoyed it. I loved the Coast Guard. And continued my criminal career, which I'll get into in the next chapter. But this is the end of chapter 1. And I hope you guys are liking it. The whole book is crazy, and the robberies are coming, and the really some wild stuff is coming. The prison, the abuse, everything else that's happened to me. I want you guys to keep following us. Please pass the word. Check out stuff in the links below. We're building this. I want to build this platform for prison reform. That's coming. You all know about that. Thanks again, everybody. Really much respect for everybody. Love you guys. Hang in there. And remember, you can listen to this on Spotify and iTunes and the links below. You got it, guys. Have a great day. Stay strong. Stay out of trouble. And make good choices.